Today, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, I would like to make a statement as ambassador of the country who has lost at least 8 million people to the Nazi terror, and which was the scene of the most horrendous crimes of the Nazi terror. I would like to commemorate the victims of this unprecedented, unthinkable crime that will live in infamy in human history, in the history of mankind. I think the Holocaust was born out of many things, but primarily out of two: hate and indifference. Hate and indifference are the root of many evils, and it comes to mind now in the context of the malicious Russian narrative about Nazi Ukraine. I understand why Russian propaganda resorts to this kind of nonsense. The aggressor needs the justification for all the crimes it commits in Ukraine and against Ukraine, against Europe, against the world, via Ukraine. I also understand why the legion of pro-Russian trolls and Russian propagandists are playing by Moscow's tune. Russia knows how to appreciate and to make it interesting for its humble servants. But there is also a category of people, aside from the paid propagandists and from dedicated fools, that is genuinely worried about the rise of Neo-Nazism throughout the world. And I would like to address them. They are worried about the world, about Europe, about Ukraine. I would like to speak personally from myself. My name is Olexander Scherba. I'm Ukrainian ambassador in Austria. I am ethnic Ukrainian. My wife is partly Russian, partly Estonian, partly Jewish, which makes my children a mix of Ukrainian, Jewish, Russian and Estonian heritage, which makes me a person who takes the dangers of the rising neo-Nazism very seriously. It is a problem, a global problem. Neo-Nazism is raising its head throughout the world, most notably, I would say, in Russia, with all its intolerance, anti-Semitism, homophobia, religious fanaticism, militarism, and of course the cult of personality on their beloved, visionary and courageous leader. But that's the reality of today's Russia, where you can be all those things: homophobic, anti-Semitic, intolerant, and at the same time an anti-fascist. We see also the rise of right-wing political forces throughout Europe, France, Hungary, the Netherlands. Coincidentally, all these forces are now Russia's friends. But what about Ukraine? Yes, the rise of neo-Nazism is a global phenomenon, and Ukraine is by far not immune to it. Yes, in my opinion, we haven't done enough to tackle this evil in the last years. And yes, some of those fighting for Ukraine right now identify themselves as right-wing or far-right, along with many Russian neo-Nazis fighting against Ukraine. However, never, at no point, did they constitute the majority or even a significant part of those fighting for Ukraine, of Ukraine's patriots. When Russia invaded Ukraine in early 2014, and when Ukraine's army turned out to be unprepared, thousands enlisted as volunteers, and there was no time to ask about political allegiances. There was only one question and one allegiance: are you ready to die defending Ukraine? And thousands of young and not so young people said yes. They fight for Ukraine, they fight for freedom, they fight for democracy and Europe. All those things Ukrainian revolution was about. And by the way, while Ukraine was going through revolution, Russian propaganda tried to pull the same thing. They were painting all the people standing on the Maidan as Nazis or Nazi helpers. But when the push came to shove, when the snipers started shooting, when over 100 people were killed, not a single one of them turned out to be a neo-Nazi. Not a single one of them. And that was the moment of truth about the revolution, what kind of revolution we were having. Unlike today's Russia, Ukraine is a free and democratic nation who elects their leaders freely and not behind the scene, who is free to criticize and not to like them. All religious denominations and ethnicities feel at home in Ukraine. Our speaker is Jewish, our Minister of Interior is Armenian, our Chief of Presidential Staff is ethnic Russian, our Minister of Economy is Lithuanian. We are not Nazis. We are a nation who chose freedom and is being punished for it. Russia is hateful. And this is the kind of situation where the hate cannot and mustn't be multiplied by indifference of Europe. Europe cannot be indifferent in this kind of situation or by Russia's lies. Otherwise, it will be all the history repeated. Thank you.